Hi, I'm Father Gregory Pine, and you're listening to the Catholic Classics podcast. Joining me today for this very special announcement episode to tell us more about Season 4 of Catholic Classics is Father Mike Schmitz. Father Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Father Gregory.
Father Mike, you will be the host of Season 4 of Catholic Classics. I've been told that the most difficult thing about the podcast is pronouncing the words Catholic Classics in quick succession. So we wish you all the best. But tell us more about what you'll be reading for the next season.
I think that's accurate. This season 4, starting October 22nd, and I'll be reading and explaining one of the greatest spiritual works of all time. It's called The Imitation of Christ by a man named Thomas Kempis. I'll be doing this in just 30 days. So starting October 22nd, we'll have 30 days of the book, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas Kempis.
If you were playing Oregon Trail, I don't know if you ever played that in computer class in high school.
Absolutely. That's the only place I played it.
Okay, perfect. Would you say that the 30-day is a grueling pace or a strenuous pace? I forget the exact language, but I remember there was a top setting, and it was serious.
Yes. I don't think you'll get diphtheria, typhoid. But no, I think that I would say this is a pretty good pace. So interesting thing about Imitation of Christ is it's thematic by chapter and kind of by books. There's 4 books in total inside that book, or 4 kind of main sections. But each day, each chapter has kind of a theme to it. I don't think you'll feel like you're being stretched by going through it in 30 days. This is important for listeners to know. Season 4, it'll only be available in the Ascension app, and other years, it's been available on other platforms, but this is only available in the Ascension app. It's still completely free. They just need to download the app, which is completely free.
So the people who got are out there wondering, should I listen through Apple Podcasts or should I listen through Spotify? The answer is none of the above. My suspicion is that a lot of people have seen The Imitation of Christ on a shelf, and they have thought to themselves, that seems like the type of book that a Christian should read. Good luck to all those Christians who choose to read it. A simple 2-step process. But then again, you have done an incredible job helping people to read books that they think they should read and come to discover in due course that they love to read, like the Bible and the Catechism. So when it comes to The Imitation of Christ, what made it such that you wanted to read this book for Season 4 of Catholic Classics?
Ascension had mentioned that we really want to look at Imitation of Christ. I kind of put my hand up really quickly because it is like just literally what you said. As a high schooler, I had my kind of initial conversion to the Lord, and we had a Catholic bookstore in my hometown, and I remember seeing it on the shelf. And I actually even remember coming across some quotes. I don't know where or how I found these quotes because the internet wasn't a thing yet at the time, but it was
DOS
people.
prompts.
Yes, exactly. It was great saints saying, nothing shaped my spiritual life more than Thomas Kempis' The Imitation of Christ. And so my original copy, where I brought it home, and it's that small little kind of booklet looking kind of a situation, and being very inspired and intimidated. That's probably my response. Yeah, I brought this book home and I was like, okay, this is what it is to be a disciple of Jesus in the world. I wanted to have some kind of mentor. I wanted to have some kind of person who could show me how to live the life of Jesus, or a disciple of Jesus in the world right now. But I just didn't feel like I had one. And so the books were so critical for me. And this is one of those books. Now, I have to admit and confess, I didn't read it all the way through. I would be inspired, and then I'd be intimidated, and then I'd put it down. And so I would pick it up at various intervals. And that's the great thing about this book. You don't have to read it all the way through. You can just pick it up and get a nugget and then chew on that for the next 24 hours or 48 hours. And so that's why I had those 2 reasons. One is it was so influential for me, but also I just want to confess that I had never read it cover to cover yet. And I had that desire that I want to know all of what's in this book. And in that way, it was reminiscent of the Bible and reminiscent of the Catechism, because I had gone deeply into both of those books and wanted to do it in a new systematic way. So that's why this one.
I think that the comparison with St. Josemaria Escrivá is pertinent because at times both authors feel a little bit like football coaches.
Yeah, yes.
They've got that particular way of communicating to you. There's one line that Father Bonaventure and I will say to each other in jest / encouragement from Josemaria Escrivá, which is, "You proud? Why?" Just devastating.
Another one from Josemaria is don't say it's your character, it's your lack of character. I fall into sin because it's my character. No, it's your lack of character.
No, yeah, exactly. That's spiritual wisdom from an offensive line coach. Okay, so beyond one speaking in aphorisms of a football coachy sort, who was Thomas à Kempis? What do we know about him? What do we know about his life, his spirituality?
Yeah, so he was a monk, a priest, as well as a monk from the 15th century. So Germany, that kind of area, but 15th century. So he was born in the end of the 1300s and died towards the end of the 1400s. And he was actually, he was an Augustinian priest. Part of his role in the monastery was training novices and writing things like this. And so here he is, he's in this monastery, and as he's training the young men who are becoming monks, he set out to write this instruction manual for young monks, but also it turned out to be kind of wisdom for any age. And then obviously people outside of the monastery started reading it, and they realized they could apply this to their lives as well.
I think that's one of the best jobs in religious life is novice master, but it's also one of the most demanding jobs.
I can imagine.
Because on the one hand, you're dealing with men who have come to the life from an abundance of zeal and want to love the Lord with their whole mind, heart, soul, and strength, and they want to be of service to the people of God, but they're rough around the edges, and so you can help them. But on the other hand, there's like a real, I suppose, maybe for some people, temptation to kind of like guruism or to an inordinate influence. You're like, ooh, I can shape them after my image. So when it comes to Thomas à Kempis, it's clear he doesn't want to shape us after his image. Mm-hmm. He wants to shape us after the Lord's image. But what do you think are the particular insights that he brings to that work? Like if we were to read the story of his soul, for instance, we could be like, all right, spiritual childhood.
Right.
You know, like rely on the Lord for everything. What is it that he has, what are the key insights that he has going on in his work?
Well, it seems like that's a really good question because, yeah, like you said, all these different religious influences, writers, teachers, preachers, have their kind of their thing. And obviously, based off the title of the book, The Imitation of Christ, Thomas à Kempis does not want us to imitate him. He wants us to imitate the Lord. And so the entire work is all about, okay, how does someone with a heart like mine end up as someone with a heart like Christ's? There's some themes he hits on pretty regularly. And the first is basically getting the foundations right. So it's sort of 4 books in this whole work. And the first book is kind of like admonitions for the spiritual life. And the first thing is get the first things first. And so he keeps coming back to this place of humility, detachment from worldly things, this inner life of prayer. The accolades and the praises of human beings are worth nothing. And yet we're so quick to abandon integrity, quick to abandon Jesus, quick to abandon the Lord in pursuit of those things. But he keeps them back to that place of just, no, here's what real humility is. You have to come back, clear away the distractions, let Christ be at the center. And this is the part for me that was the part of the book that I read and reread that was both inspiring and intimidating because it begins with like this self-discipline, really, and interior conversion. And so there's that first book is very much about getting the first things first. And then the second book, it builds on that. So it goes from kind of outward discipline to, you might say, like inner intimacy with the Lord. And what I mean by that is he highlights the need for purity of heart. He highlights the need for getting away from the voices that could compete and begin to steal your peace of mind. And he really, really, in book 2, leans into the need to have confidence in God rather than in other human beings, rather than anybody else other than God. And then the book 3 and 4 are kind of unique that it's written as a dialogue between Christ and his disciple. And so you'll have these chapters where it's from the perspective of Christ. This is kind of in the voice of Jesus, and the perspective from the disciples saying, okay, Lord, this is what you're teaching me. And it's here's Jesus who's consoling at times, who is instructing at other times and challenging at other times. And then here's the disciple who responds by often saying, wow, Lord, here's where I am. And it's really good. And then the 4th book is on the Blessed Sacrament. So it's on the Eucharist, on the role of the Mass. And so that's what you can expect. So I would go back to this place and say, this really has, and you probably know this, well, you would know this way better than I would. It is in many ways, if Therese is saying, here's the spirituality of the little way. This might be a spirituality of, and maybe this is the wrong way to say it, but spirituality of the monk. Would that be accurate, or would that be? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I've taken this as a new teaching method. When somebody asks a question, I give them the short answer and the long answer.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Short answer.
I don't know.
Yes.
Long answer. What I'm about to say for the next 7 minutes. Well, from what I understand, you have the High Middle Ages, like in the 13th century.
Right.
And then in the 14th century, you have this kind of flourishing of what we might consider devotional literature or kind of mystical literature. And a lot of that has to do with the life that grew out of both the friars movement and the penitential movement. Mm-hmm. So you'd have people there like St. Catherine of Siena, for instance. And then this would be part of a next wave of what's sometimes called like the Via Moderna, which is transitioning us into a kind of more contemporary spirituality. And so it tends to be more interpersonally or emotionally and psychologically charged, but it still profits from a lot of the resources of the tradition, both ancient and medieval. And so my experience of reading like early monastic literature is that it tends to be outward as a way to get inward. So there's a sense it's like, just do the disciplines, sweetheart. Like we don't need to hear what you're thinking or what you're feeling. Just do them for 80 years. And then at the end of the day, you might have an insight, check back later, which can be severe. Whereas I think you get some of that in this, but then you also get some of the more emotional and psychological insights, which help kind of speak to us as a contemporary audience, because we like to talk about our thoughts and feelings, and it's not bad to.
You can read between the lines, and a lot of times he is inviting people to get away from like scholastic debate, and where people are trying to make a name for themselves in how intelligent they are, how wise they are, how and just like you said, they're getting in some ways to the heart. Like you said, like psychologically speaking, emotionally speaking. He even some of his meditations on Christ's passion towards the end of the Imitation of Christ are just like, wow, that elicits an emotional response, not merely an intellectual response of here's the discipline I need to take next, which I really found really helpful for me. And obviously it resonated outside of monasteries because it has been the number 2 book, maybe they say number 2 spiritual book of all time after the Bible.
Whoa,
That's
I
what
didn't
I've heard,
realize
at
that.
least.
Okay, well, which leads me to my next question. I was going to ask you what you think, what's the staying power of this book? Is it just a 500-year fad, or do you think that it's going to be around for another 500 years? And if so, what is it about the book itself that you think gives it this staying power, or which makes it a kind of perennial treasure in the life of the church?
I'm going to say 2 things. One is, I say this on the last day on day 30 in the podcast. So I want this is a sneak preview for everyone who's going to make it to day 30. And my best friend, he was raised Pentecostal. He became Catholic, and now he's a missionary in Cambodia. He and his wife and their 5 kids, and just a really good man, dedicated to the Lord. When he and his wife were first considering Catholicism, they picked up the Imitation of Christ. And he said, I read it, and I was like, it's pretty basic. I put it down, and he says, I look back now, this is maybe 15 years ago or more. He says, I look back now and think, wow, what an arrogant, just like prideful man. What am I thinking? But part of it is, you can pick it up. I can pick it up as a 16-year-old, was where I picked it up. He can pick it up as a kind of a newbie in the Catholic world. And then you can also pick it up as someone who has been living this life and pursuing the Lord for a long time and still feel like you can wrap your arms around it. I don't think that there's very little about it. I mentioned it's intimidating, but there's very little about it that is unapproachable. Unless it's just, it can come off as severe or demanding at times. I think you can take in as much as you can take in. And so when I read it as a 16-year-old, that was great. When Nick, my friend, read it as a new Catholic, he was like, oh, basic, because he could take in what he could take in. Now he's gone back to it 15 years later plus, and he's like, wow, this is significant for my spiritual life. And so I think that's the first thing is it's approachable in the sense that you can read it and feel like you got something out of it. The second part is It really is basics. It's Christ-centered, not self-centered. That's absolutely true. It tries to teach interiority, like tries to teach that sense of there's an inner world going on right now. So pay attention to that inner world going on right now. And super practical. That says, okay, do these things, walk this way, reflect on the Lord like this, put first things first, never let secondary things compete for the Lord, he's always first. And I think its practicality. It goes a long way for its staying power.
Beautiful. We've heard tell that many saints in the years since Thomas à Kempis lived have profited from this book. So I'm thinking of St. Ignatius of Loyola or St. Therese of Lisieux. But he himself is not a saint, so he has not been beatified or canonized. Is there a backstory to that? Should we approach this book with some fear and trepidation, given that it's not written by one himself canonized?
So here's my understanding, and my understanding is the only reason why Thomas Kempis hasn't been canonized. It has to do with the manner of his death. Is this accurate? Is this what you've heard as well?
Go for it. I don't know.
So what I've heard is that he, for all intents and purposes, what people know about him is that he lived an exemplary life of virtue, and he clearly taught very well. So his teachings are solid, and his life was a good picture of what it is to be a disciple of Jesus. When they exhumed his body from the grave, there are indications that he was buried alive accidentally. No. They found like marks of someone who had woken up in a coffin and were trying to get out. So then the only reason why the church hasn't declared him to be a canonizable saint is because they don't know if he died in despair or not. And that's the rationale, or that's the reasoning that I've come across in looking that up.
That's wild. Okay, so for those of you hearing that description and thinking to yourself, that seems like such a random reason not to consider somebody a saint, I suppose we can recall that the church's process for beatification and canonization was kind of coming together in the late Middle Ages. So usually canonization was by public acclamation. Just a lot of people would be like, this person is really holy. And usually you would look for confirming signs. And one of the classic confirming signs for a canonization would be when the body was exhumed, it was either found to be incorrupt or it smelled really good. Folks now are probably at the point where they're like, I'm getting pumped about reading The Imitation of Christ. How about a couple of words of encouragement as they purchase the book and then begin reading? Like kind of where to start. As one of my Protestant friends says, what's the heart posture? Any advice on how to approach it prayerfully or devotionally?
Christians have approached this book and have been formed by it and taught by it. So that should give some kind of weight, some kind of credibility to his witness, to Thomas Kempis's witness, to the words that are written here. And so I would say to be able to approach it with that sense of, okay, I'm just here to learn. I'm not here. I don't have to figure this out, or why did they say this, or what do you mean by that? I'm just here to be taught. And so I think someone's first posture is not, I'm here to just, chew it up and spit out the bones or what I don't like, but I'm here to learn. Now, in the process of learning, kind of like when it comes to any ancient document, this is written with a medieval worldview versus a modern life, and that's fine. It still translates, but you have to translate it, I'd say. But there's going to be some things that are foreign. Things that were very, very normal for a medieval monk are less normal for us. Although we've heard of things like fasting, we've heard of prayer, we've heard of obedience. I mean, that's a big word that Thomas Kempis uses when it comes to obedience. And here we are as modern readers, modern humans, modern Christians, that obedience isn't necessarily a word that we know how to lean into. I think, Father Gregory, you and I do when it comes to our superiors, because we have superiors that we owe obedience to, we promised obedience to, but that sense of, in a modern world, what is really trying to be said. So I would say that first posture, I'm here to be taught. Secondly, I may have to translate some things. So I don't want to pick it apart and object to everything that strikes me as foreign or strikes me as challenging. I want to let myself be taught, and later on I might have to say, okay, that was how he wrote this 500 years ago or more. Here's how I can apply that to my life. So I'd say, again, let him teach you, translate, and be patient with yourself and be patient with that application to your life.
We have a lightning round coming up of kind of wild and zany questions. But before that, one final question. I'm thinking here of, I'll say the first season of Catholic Classics was on the Introduction to the Devout Life. And in the second book of Introduction to the Devout Life, St. Francis de Sales teaches a kind of method of meditation. And the last thing that he says you should do is kind of collect some little flowers from your time in meditation and then wrap them up so that way you can smell the good scent of those flowers throughout the course of the day, metaphorically speaking. So over the course of the next 30 days, people will be hearing from you and profiting from your engagement with the text, your meditation on the text. So maybe it's a sneak peek or a little preview of coming attractions. What's maybe one particular passage or quote from the Imitation of Christ that has stayed with you, and how does it speak to you personally?
I would say that there's an echo of something that St. John of the Cross has also said that sticks with me. Thomas Kempis wrote, at the day of judgment, the end of our lives, stand before the Lord. He says, at the day of judgment, we shall not be asked what we have read, but what we have done, not how well we've spoken, but how religiously we've lived. You know, John of the Cross had said, at the twilight of our lives, we'll be judged on love alone. And I just really appreciate Thomas Kempis at the day of judgment. Well, we shall not be asked what we have read, but what we have done, not how well we have spoken, but how religiously we've lived, or, you know, how faithfully to the Lord we've lived. That's one that carry with me.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's chastening, because sometimes I live my life as if the highest standard were either efficiency or inbox zero, which it turns out yieldeth little in the spiritual order. But here we are, working our way. Okay, now it's time for something a little lighter. Not that wasn't light. I felt like that was light. But now it's time for something even lighter. We'll be asking each other some fun and surprising questions that the Ascension producers have put together for us. We also haven't seen these questions ahead of time, so we're going in blind. Also, the questions are written in Spanish. Just kidding. Okay, let's dive in. First, for you, if you rewrote The Imitation of Christ for Gen Z, what would you title it?
Wow. Okay, for Gen Z. Does this mean like Gen Z slang?
Maybe Gen Z slang, or something that would speak to Gen Z, or the type of thing that would get a 13 to 28-year-old to buy it. Hard to say.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to avoid the slang thing, because I would attempt to use a word like Riz or Skibbity, and it would be horrible. So I would say this. I would say Jesus, a pattern for life, or pattern for living. No, wait. A model for Christians. I don't know. That was my best.
Nailed it. I'm here for it.
I don't know if that's the case.
Other questions for you. Number 2. So Thomas à Kempis emphasizes the importance of silence in our lives. What's one thing silence has taught you that noise never could?
My own heart. I would say that. Yeah, that would be it. My own heart, because I think in our lives we don't know what we think typically when we keep having someone else talking in our ears. I don't know what I think. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know my own heart unless I enter silence. That's the first answer that pops into my brain.
All right, here we go. Would you rather live in solitude for a month or live without coffee for a month?
Solitude for a month, definitely.
Ah, wow. Last one for you. And then there are some for me, which you can do as few of them as you like. If Thomas à Kempis had Twitter, which I guess now goes by the name X, but we will never use that name until such time as they come up with a comparable verb like tweet.
Right. Yeah.
Xing, that's not going to happen.
Xing, yeah, that makes sense.
What would his bio be? So you've got 3 options here, but you can choose a 4th. So A, professional soul minimalist. B, living for eternity, not for likes. Or C, DMs closed for worldly vanities.
Now, I think this is funny because I don't know that I caught humor in his instruction. so the idea that every one of these is like living for eternity, DMs closed for worldly vanities, is like what you'd say if you're trying to be sarcastic. Just like, by the way, this is my heart, and I don't care about worldly vanities. I'm going to say that he would be, of course, living for eternity, not for likes. But if he had to put something in his bio, it would be professional soul minimalist.
Okay.
But
Nice.
I would maybe not, because he would see that
Sounds like a
that's pointing
boast.
to himself, right? That's pointing
Yeah.
to his like, here's how I live, you guys. Here's how have chosen to live as a minimalist, as opposed to as a disciple. So man,
Yeah.
I think he would have had a reference to Jesus in his bio.
Bingo. Yeah, so he wouldn't be the kind of snarky habitant of X/Twitter. Christ
Maybe.
Alone. It'd be something so simple, it's profound.
That's probably
Yeah.
Christ alone. Yeah. Okay, so I have questions for you.
I'm ready.
Okay, this is you're probably better at lightning rounds than I am. That
Not really.
lightning round was more of a slow roll. But if
Hey,
you
it's
had
your prerogative.
if you had one quote unquote holy superpower, like perfect humility or unshakable patience or constant prayer, which would you pick?
Okay, not on the list of suggestions, but I would pick perfect obedience.
Oh, yeah?
So for the reasons that you described, and the reasons that Thomas à Kempis commends obedience, it seems like a lot of the spiritual life goes through obedience. Now, sometimes I wonder and I worry if I'm just doing what I want and calling it religious life. So I would choose perfect obedience.
That's a great superpower. Also, especially when you have something so clear, like it's very clear who your superiors are. I mean, every great saint has said that obedience is at the core of all of it. Second one, Thomas à Kempis, in this book, talks a lot about embracing suffering, picking up our cross, etc. For you, in moments of suffering in your life, what spiritual disciplines do you turn to for strength or hope or that ability to keep going? Yeah, what do you embrace when it comes to suffering in your life?
St. Thomas does talk about like remedies for sadness, and he'll talk about the contemplation of the truth, the company of one's friends, and then like he also mentions a couple of silly and kind of humble things, one of which is crying. He says like if you're sad, well then it helps to be sad, soul and body. And I think that so like in periods of suffering, I find that like step 1 and step 2 are 1, be curious, and 2, be honest. Like if you lose somebody you love, like everyone grieves at his own pace. And when you hear that at the outset, you're like, what does that mean? That is the least helpful thing in the whole wide world. But I think that if anything, it's an encouragement to actually be curious about what you are experiencing and then to be honest about the experience. Lord,
Yeah.
I'm sad. And I'd prefer not to be sad, but somehow I suspect that I'm probably going to be sad for a bit. So like, how's this going to go? So I think, yeah, curiosity and honesty.
Curiosity and honesty. That's awesome. That's so good. I'm literally going to write that down, and it'll make its way into a podcast or homily. So thank you. I'm crediting you right now.
Party on. I'm
I
here
have
for it.
two more. One is kind of like you had the X quote. Here's 3 options. What would Thomas à Kempis say if someone invited him to a karaoke party? Would he say A, only if it's Gregorian chant? B, sing but let your heart be silent? Or C, vanity of vanities?
Yeah, all good options. I might have to go with D. Do you have any Carrie Underwood?
Nice. Yeah. Of course he loves her. Everyone does. Who doesn't love
Exactly.
Carrie Underwood? Last question.
There we go.
If your spiritual director told you to live like a 15th century monk for a week, what would be your biggest struggle?
Oh, yeah. Physically, the fact that of my 28 teeth, I probably had cavities in like 23 of them. I suppose like emotionally, psychologically, the fact that I'm accustomed to think about myself an incredible amount and like feel sorry for myself all the time. But my impression is that in the 15th century, you just don't have like the opportunity or the luxury for such like things because like the well just froze and now you have to like go down a 20-foot shaft and break up the ice. I think that I'd be out of my greatest hobby, which is feeling sorry for myself.
That's great. No, that's so good because it'd be on one level. It'd be physical stuff like just, don't I take this for granted? What modern medicine, dentistry, optometry. And then also, wow, I love that answer. So good. Grateful. Again,
Here we go.
One more thing I'm going to steal. Really good.
Party on. There's no plagiarism in preaching. All right. Well, thanks, Father Mike. Thanks for this time. Thanks for doing season 4 of Catholic Classics. I look forward to listening and profiting with those who download the Ascension app, which is available through the App Store if one searches Ascension, or online if one goes to app.ascensionpress.com. And again, it's only on the Ascension app that you'll be able to get the content and then get reflection questions and full transcripts. Be sure to turn on notifications so that way you can get sweet updates as to all the new things that come out. And to get started, download the free reading plan for Imitation of Christ by visiting ascensionpress.com/Catholic Classics. All right. Any final thoughts?
I think that this is if someone's like, is it worth it though? 100%. Absolutely. Yes. That's my final answer.
Bingo. All the best, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next time on Catholic Classics. Peace.